Hello and welcome to Lesson 4 of the Doomsday Game Dev Club. Gamefroot, as you've probably known, has been pretty buggy and it's just not working out. So we're going to move on to Unity. Unity is used by many indie game development studios. It's free to use. And it's awesome. It's what I'm learning to use right now for a project I'm working on. So I get to teach you guys stuff that I am actually using, which helps me out too. These next two lessons, we're going to try to get everything that we've created, all our art assets, and then kind of pick up where we left off with getting the movement in there and terrain and stuff. But today, what we are covering is getting the character into the game as a sprite, setting up the sprite to work correctly, and then adding code to control it, pressing the left and right arrow keys. So let's begin. So let's get started and download Unity. So do a Google search for Unity. The first result should be this, the actual Unity website. You want to click this Get Started. You're welcome to explore all the different features of it. So now it's going to ask you to subscribe and stuff, but you don't have to. You can go into individual here, and then there's this personal one. There's a student one, but that's if you're like pretty much if you're learning this at school or something somewhere. Like I can't officially, well, you have to be 13 and up too, but anyways, doesn't really matter. Get the personal one, click Get Started, and well, one thing to know why there's these pricey ones too is you get extra features, and maybe later down the road and you have some money, you'd want to use them. But also, what they're saying is making money off of this. You can make money off of using Unity. You can sell your games. You can put them on Steam or maybe even Xbox Live or PSN or whatever. But you have to start paying them. And it first starts like with the free version if you're making over 100,000 in the last 12 months. So once you hit that, if you do sell your game, make over 100,000 for the next 12 months, you need to start paying them money. Like you could just get the plus and pay them $40 a month, or the pro for 150 a month. It just depends. Until as long as you're making that much money, so per year. So anyways, let's get started. There's a first time users thing. Hit that. Like I was explaining about the 100K in revenue from your games. So yeah. Hit agree and download. Then it's going to download. And there's the Unity Hub set up, so go ahead and install that. You'll probably want to pause the video and return once you have Unity downloaded. And once you do, you want to open the hub. It's called Unity Hub, and you'll want to start a new project. So I'm going to click New here, and we're making a 2D game. So I'm going to select 2D. You can select 3D or 3D with extras, and there's the other ones, but we're making a 2D game. Now you could still make a side-scrolling 3D game if you wanted to, but we're not using 3D assets, so it's all 2D. If you wanted to make like a side view or top-down game, you totally could do 3D. But we are focused on 2D since that's what I've been teaching you with the Piscal app. And alright, so let's get this started. I'm gonna, what should I name it? Whatever. I'm just gonna call it Curse because I'm calling it Curse the Wereshark. And I'm going to create a folder to save it in. Call it Cursed. And click it, select folder. That's where the project's going to be. It's important you save it somewhere where you can easily find it. You don't want to get in the. Sometimes they'll give you default settings to save it somewhere else. So, create it somewhere where in a folder somewhere that you can access that's easy to do. So anyways, I'm going to hit create. And it's going to load up Unity. Sometimes this can take a bit. Okay, once we have Unity loaded, we can actually get to work. So it can be a little overwhelming at first seeing all this. Now you probably notice my screen looks a little bit different than yours. I'm going to go to it's in the default when you first load it up. The default view of where all the different windows are. I'm not a fan of this layout, so I'm going to show you how to change it to look like mine. And I'll explain each area as we go along. So this is the scene. This is where you're going to take and grab all your assets and put it on there. Like your tiles that you've created for your levels or your characters. It's a lot like what we were doing in Gamefroot, where we just grab and drop things in there. And but I want to move this. Well, let's see. I'm going to move this hierarchy. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'm going to move this project down here. And then I'm going to move game down here. And I'm going to slide this over. And then let's see. I'm going to take this inspector and make it on this side. And I'll go more into what everything is. You don't have to do it this way, but the reason why I like this setup is I can see what's going on in the game sometimes as I'm putting things there, so it gives me a better idea. With the hierarchy, well, I'll explain what those parts are. First, we need to worry about, we need to get our character into the game. That's our first step with all this. And we need to be able to put them in the scene here so we can do stuff with them. So, what I'm going to do is with this screen right here, I'm going to create a folder under assets. I'm going to call it Sprites. And now that I have that, I'm going to go into Piscal app. I'm going to select my idle one that I made. I'm going to hit Edit Sprite. I need to export this differently than we did for Gamefroot. There's a sprite sheet that we can create where it's going to put all the frames on the same sheet. So I'm just going to download that. And once I have it downloaded, I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call this one Player. And then I'm just going to change this to one column layout because I don't need to. Alright, so Player. I'm going to then import new asset. And go to my downloads and select that I just downloaded. And now I have that in the game. So I know this is called idle. I'm going to change its name. Oops, selected the wrong one. Just going to name this one Player Idle. Now that I got this in, so you can see with this project, it's kind of like where all our folders are located and all our assets that we're using in the game. Everything we create, our sprites, also our code, and anything else, this is where we're going to put it all so the game knows where to find the files. So after I import this, there's a bunch of properties I'm going to need to fix on this sprite. First is there's sprite mode. It says single, that means it's only going to show a single thing. There's a problem with this. If I drag and drop it out there, it's going to show those two things. So I don't want that. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to change this to multiple in the sprite mode so it knows that there's like multiple frames in there. The other thing I need to do is there's a setting for bilinear for filter mode. This makes it look blurry and I want it to look sharp. Another problem is, if you noticed, my image didn't look too great. By default, it tries to compress the image, so it's a smaller file size. I'm going to turn that to none. Once I have all those, I'm going to hit this, and now I'm going to slice it. I'm going to tell it to start at the bottom and just slice it, with the pivot just at the bottom so it knows where to slice it, and then slice, boom. Now I have two sprites where before it was one. And I'm going to change this to the name of the sprite, Player Idle 01. And then with this one, I'm going to copy and paste, or copy that so I can paste it here and call it 02. And then once I got all that set up, it's how I want it, how I name it. I'm going to hit apply. Now, if I select this, it cut them into two sprites there. And I'm going to select this first one and put it out here into the scene. So, I think I'll rename him just to be Player. This is kind of, we're using the image as a placeholder just so we know it's him. Might not necessarily be the starting frame, we'll see. But anyways, now I got that on there, and you'll notice down here in the game screen, it's very tiny. This is what we'll be seeing in the game. If I hit play, I can't do anything, but this is what I'd be able to control and play. But super teeny. So I'm going to select the camera. You can see preview there. If you hit F while you're selecting one of these things, it'll focus on it. See how I can select the player? Oh, well, it won't zoom in, but anyways, I want to reduce this. So I'm going to click and drag. You see down below? That's a little more representative of what I want, and I'll probably change the dimensions and stuff for this later, but for now, this is fine by me until I get things in more. So you can see it's a better view. Now I can zoom in on him. I pressed F that time and it zoomed in. Okay. And now I'm going to call it player controls. Now it's really important that you name your script right away, because if you let me show you. It's basically, this is going to be what kind of class it is by naming it right now. And what happens is it's going to, as you'll see here, it'll make more sense a little bit, but it says player controls. That's what I named it. Now if I were to create C script and then I'm like, oh, and then I didn't name it, but I want to rename it. Now, if you notice here, the class says new behavior script, so it didn't reflect the name I gave, and that could cause issues. So, you always want to name it first before you hit enter, and then it'll be labeled as that class. So, let me open this up. If you double click it, it'll open up the script. And let me walk you through what we're seeing here. Up top is what we have are called libraries. Libraries of different scripts. By having these available, it's basically enabling it to be available to be used in here instead of loading it up with every single script possible. That would cause the game to slow down. So it limits by how much it actually needs. And you can add more if you want, just don't need it. So, like I was saying about a class, that's what we named our script. Don't need to go into too much detail right now. Alright, so there's two parts to this. There's the start and the update. The start is whenever you load up the object into the game, it will run things that you put in here as far as code goes. Update is every frame per second. So like there's 24 frames per second by default with Unity. So this would be called every 24th of a second. So we don't really need the start for right now. We'll keep it because we might need it later. But on this update, I need to set up controls. I need to know what controls I need to use to move the character left and right, and I know I'm going to use the right and left arrow keys. So, one of the libraries you use is called input, and I need to get into a command using this thing called get access raw, and I'm searching for something called horizontal specifically. So, as you've noticed, as I've typed things, it kind of fills in things. If you hover over stuff, it gives you more explanations. But what I did here is I'm calling an input part of Unity, and it knows it's called input. and it knows what I'm looking for specifically is called horizontal. And I'm going to go back to Unity here and show you a little bit more what I mean. So if I go into edit, project settings, there's a bunch of options here, but specifically input manager. See how it says horizontal? So this has keys on the keyboard assigned left, right, AD to move left and right. It already has this predefined setup. It also knows that it can use a joystick or a controller. So if you have a controller that works on your computer, you can actually use that as well. So with this, we're going to set it up so it knows that you're pressing keys on the keyboard to move them, and it'll move them. So we know we have that, and that's what I need. This is the thing that I'm going to call. But I need to give it a variable type so I don't have to call this every time. What I'm doing is creating a variable called speed that identifies it as this. It has all the info and data in there. Now what a variable type, or what a variable is just another, it's like a nickname for something that you want to use it for, just that stores any kind of data. So I use float, which is a number type. It has a decimal in it. There's also integers that are whole numbers, strings that use text like this, so it looks for a name. We'll go more into that later. Don't need to worry about it too much right now. So, you know what? I enabled that wrong. I'm going to call this Control X. Because it's looking for the X controls, moving left and right. And in case you don't remember what I taught before, there's the X and the Y plane. X is horizontal, Y is up and down. So if I want to move something on the X plane, that's left and right. I want to move it up, it's on the Y plane. So I got that set up. Now I need to tell it to actually move the character. But first, I need to assign this, my player, a component, which is called, if I type in here, rigid body 2D, what this is doing is it's giving the character physics. It's giving it gravity. It's allowing it to use velocity, which is going in a direction at a set speed. And that's specifically what we need out of this is its velocity. So now that I added this, I can actually access the object's velocity by using a command called getComponent. And I'm going to say rigid body 2D, because that's just what I added that has the velocity. And then I need to add these dot velocity. There's velocity already there. So what I'm going to do is, once I have that data, I'm going to convert it into a vector. Now a vector is a direction in an axis, in a dimension, like the X and the Y, but there's also Z with 3D, but we only need X and Y, so I'm doing a vector 2. And then I'm going to use that variable Control X, because that has all the data of whether I'm pushing the left and right arrow keys for the X, and then 0 for the Y, because I don't need to go jump or anything right now. And then I need to have a speed that it can work on, that it can, that will multiply the current speed and make it go faster. So I'm going to give it a 10 for starters. So I'm going to leave a comment for these so I know what I did. Created variable for left and right arrow key input, and then I'm going to put got player velocity and increased speed based on direction. And I'm going to save this. I'm going to hit save all, or save assets, sorry. Control S. And now that that's all set up, what I can do is go back into the game. I'm going to select the player, and I'm going to add another component, but instead of doing the add component, I'm going to select player controls and drag it over. And it becomes part of it. So now the script is telling him to do stuff. So I'm going to hit, when you want to test your game, there's this play button up here. And as you can see, I can move left and right by pressing the arrow keys, but he's falling because he has gravity. So I'm going to hurry up and go back to this rigid body part and set it says gravity scale. That's saying how strong the gravity is on him. I'm going to set it to 0 for now. Now if I hit play, he stays there, but I can move left and right. Alright, so, he's moving too fast. I don't like that speed. So I can go back here and change it, or another thing I can do back to using variables is I'm going to use float speed equals, I'll say 5.0 this time, because 10 was too fast. I'm going to reduce it by half. Oh, and it's a float. I made it a number, so I need to actually put an F at the end of it for being a float. As you may have noticed, it had little red squiggly lines below. And it's telling me, like, this is buggy. This isn't going to work. So I know I have to fix it, so I need to put an F there because it's a float variable. And like I said, a float has a percentage, so I can actually, or not a percentage, but decimal, I could put 5.5 if I want to be more specific. Instead of doing a 4 and a 5, I can do 4.25 or 5.25 or whatever. So I need to change this, though. Change it to speed. And there you go. I declared it there. Now I can use it here. It knows that I want 5.5 whenever it calls this. And the nice thing about this is if I wanted to use more code with the speed, I don't have to put 5.5 in each line of code and keep changing each line of code. I just put speed. And whenever I change this, it changes everywhere that I put speed too. So it works out pretty well. So I'm going to save. I'm going to hit Control S to save it. Then I am going to try it out, see what happens. It's a little bit better, kind of fast. Could be a little bit slower maybe, I don't know. But I want this easier to adjust. Instead of me going in and typing up the code and changing it, I'm going to enable it so I can change it in the game. I'm going to create brackets and put serialized field right there. Now you notice I've been putting semicolons. That's the normal thing at the end of the code, but with brackets you don't have to do that, at least in this case. I'm going to save it now. And now, as it's updated, if you look over here where the script is, now it has a number. So I can change that to 4 and see what happens here. Oh, I need to reset this. Alright. Let me make sure. Oh, it didn't save it at a 4. You know why? Because I changed it while it was in play. If you change anything in here while it's got the play button going, it's not going to save your changes. So I need to go in and put a 4. Hit play. That way it's going to be saved. Yeah, that's pretty good. So, he's all set. He's moving. Alright, and that's going to do it for today. I hope you learned a lot. I know it's a lot to take in. Just go at your own pace. Be sure to rewind and watch parts over and over again. I have to do that all the time when I'm learning stuff. And if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below or go to the Facebook page and you can add a comment there too. Alright, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.